Good evening and welcome to a very special comedy festival screening of The Room. The Room's gone on to become one of the biggest films of all time at Cinema Nova. So we took the time to talk to the film's co-star, Greg Sestero, who's not only starred in the film, but wrote a book about it, had that book made into an Oscar-nominated film, and has then gone on to make his own movies. Please welcome Greg Sestero. So Greg, everybody's talking about the Academy Awards. As someone who's been through the experience with The Disaster Artist and the movie that was based on your book, can you give us some insight into what that's like, the immersive experience of it, and kind of what's the difference between what we see at, say, the telecast of the Oscars and what goes on behind the scenes?
I think so. Somebody who's loved movies and who's watched, the Oscars and watched that pretty much my entire life, getting a chance to actually go there in 2018, you almost feel like a constant, overwhelming high when you enter that. So when I remember I met Tommy at his house because he wanted, it was really bizarre because he wanted the limo to pick him up in an alley, not at his address, which made no sense to anybody. A24 is like, we don't know what this is, but okay, we'll make it work. So we had to I went over there. I got into my tuxedo in this storage unit. It was the least glamorous thing you could have ever imagined. So I got in my tuxedo, we get into the limo and we're going down Santa Monica Boulevard, and there's limos and people going crazy. And we're in the limo and Tommy and I are in the back, and it reminded me of going to the premiere of The Room, which was the joke of God, this is going to be the worst movie. There's no chance. And here we are going going to the Golden Globes. And then a car pulls up next to us and is honking because we have The Room posters on all the windows. So there's a car next to us honking and lowers the window, and it's James Franco. And he's waving, and he's with his brother, and we lower the windows and we're waving at each other and taking photos. And it was just the whole thing was so surreal. And we're pulling into the back way, and it was you've been on these streets for so many years, these back streets in Beverly Hills, or just driving through in traffic. And now we're going to this event where it's all blocked off on the red carpet. We pull up and we get out, and there's people taking photos. And obviously it had been a little bit of this with festivals, but now, you're at this big award show and you step out and every moment is documented. You walk in and you see these people you've watched on TV or movies for years now, The Rock, and people are interviewing you. And it's sort of this whole wave of, it's like a blur. It's one of those things when people talk about a dream or things like that. And so you're in it, and then you're speaking about things, but at least for me, I think for Tommy, he can just go and he'll just speak about anything and it won't even he won't process it. But for me, it all went by as this kind of days. And personally now, having experienced it and looking back, I wish I would have been maybe enjoyed it a little bit more, been more present and not been so taken by that moment, because, it's just another day in life and you should be enjoying it. But I think you're so on edge and you're so overwhelmed processing everything and trying to say the right thing or think of the right thing that it's really just an incredible experience. And then you go in to this, into this ballroom and I'm using the restroom, Hugh Grant is next to me. Justin Timberlake is washing his hands right there. And it's you almost feel, because it's the first time, and I'd gone to a few things with Tommy where we had sat in the way back as seat fillers, and you're there not for the right reasons, but now you're actually there for the right reason, and you question it you can't really believe it's all happening. And then I think once you're seated at the table, we were seated next to John Goodman and Andy Samberg, which was super random. But once you're there and you're eating, it's almost like you're at just a restaurant or a function. You're so less focused on what's actually happening. Because you're just hanging out with the group, and we were seated next to the Get Out table, and people are just doing their thing in the commercial break. So you never really focus too much on the show. And you notice when people win and everyone's cheering, it's a very different feeling than what you see on TV because there's so many things being edited and cut to. And so the big moment came when Emma Stone and Shirley MacLaine went up there to do, Best Actor in a Comedy. And I think that's when obviously the focus came, because that was your big moment. But for example, when James won, I was trying to get Tommy to go up on stage and do all that. And none of that was shown. It was almost like everything was cut to each thing to have it make sense. And I think it's a lot more casual when you're there. And obviously watching it on TV, it seems like a movie. It's cut to the perfect moments and everyone's shot properly. But I'm so glad I got a chance to experience an award season. It feels like it's really a season. Like I remember we started in September with the festivals, and then we did a few festivals, and then we did all the press, and then there's the release, and then there's like the nominations, and then there's the lead up to the nominations. So it's such a huge part of your life that enriches every aspect of it. And I feel like when it comes time to the Oscars, it's sort of like the Super Bowl, and then it's that day, and then it ends. It's a really it's an overwhelming feeling of that journey, and hopefully if you get nominated or you win, it's even better. But it's really something that, as like a filmmaker or actor, it's really an incredible thing to experience at least once.
Let's go back to the start with Cinema Nova's connection to the room. We take ourselves back to 2010. You get some questions from the other side of the world with, can you help us out in terms of like promoting this movie? Cut to practically 13 years later of screening this film. The film's become one of our biggest films of all time here at the cinema. I think it's in our top 10 of biggest films of all time. And everybody knows this movie now. It's something that the whole world's become aware of. And obviously in the intervening years, you wrote a book about it. The book was made into a movie. You've made plenty of movies yourself since. I mean, when you look back at that period before the movie broke out, how do you kind of like reconcile that with where you are right now?
To me, I've always tried to I've always been fascinated by the making of the movie and the journey. But to me, looking back like 20 years, I mean, what is it that this movie has that has broken all the rules that people 20 years later still love to see? I think any filmmaker, that's sort of what everybody's goal is to make something that's timeless. I mean, you look at some of my favorite movies, Home Alone, Back to the Future. These are movies that people still love 30, 40 years later. And yet The Room is sort of something that is like a glitch in the matrix, I feel like. And so I've sort of looked back and I'm like, I appreciate like whatever it is, like I admire that. Like that's what anytime you're going to make a film, you shoot for that. You shoot for people wanting to come back, 11, 12-year-old kids showing up. They love it. They're quoting it. That obsession with living inside a film is something that like, that's what made me want to make movies. So I just don't understand how it was this film, because it doesn't make sense in any capacity. And to me, over 20 years, I think that's a beautiful thing, that we still have movies that can break through, that can affect us and make us laugh and bring us together. Even if there aren't stars in there, there's not sci-fi, there's not great CGI effects, there's still sort of that human condition that can, bring people back. And I think it brings people back because it affects them on an emotional level, and it's that humor that we all need. And so I've just, it's come in waves little by little. First, it was people watching it, then people loving it, then people writing about it. And then, traveling is a huge passion of mine. And the fact that I got to go to Australia and be there and meet people that talk about it, that love it. I mean, I think people in Australia love it just as much, if not more than the US. I mean, the Cinema Nova screenings, the passion that those people bring is just, it's incredible. So it's been, an incredible journey for me. And it's funny because, this week I'm getting a chance to go to Alaska, and that is going to be the 50th state. So I've now traveled to every state in the United States. I could have been on 10 soap operas. I could have been on, several good films that came out that were properly made, that didn't have like spoon pictures and green screen effects, that were just good movies and who wouldn't have affected people, or maybe, brought people together. the way The Room did. So I've just come to appreciate whatever it is and just try to learn from it and continue to create stuff.
And obviously now you've, after going through the experience with the disaster artist and writing a best-selling book and having that adapted, you've now kind of branched out into making your own film. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the movies that you have made yourself, that you've developed, and what you're working on at the moment?
I mean, I think after I survived The Room and kind of told the story of the book, it's almost like now I think it's just about having fun, going out and pursuing kind of interests and taking risks with making new projects. Cause I think we really need that. I think we really need original movies that don't always, again, follow the rules. And so I started this in like 2017. I'd seen a rough cut of The Disaster Artist, and I thought, when people see this movie, they're going to want to know, who are these guys? What have they been doing? And I thought, this is a great chance to just go out there and finally follow through on that dream of making movies. And that's when we made Best Friends, which I learned a ton with, which was sort of like the first endeavor. And then right around the pandemic, I had moved to Arizona. This really great property was offered to me. It was where they used to shoot old Westerns, like with John Wayne back in the 60s. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to move down there and I'm going to take it all in. I'm going to write a script. I'm going to pull a Tommy. I'm going to write, direct, star, and do all that stuff. And what was great is, because there's been such, support and love for The Room, you have so many creative people that want to follow you on the next journey and help out. So we had a really great crew down there and really fun cast. So we got to go out there and make this film during the pandemic. Just ended just as the pandemic happened. So we've been editing, did some festivals. It's going to come out this fall. It's a true, kind of based on a true story about a cult. And so it's called Miracle Valley, and it's going to probably, I want to make sure to show it in theaters before streaming. So I'm hoping to do that this fall for the Halloween season. We've already done some advanced screenings, and people, I mean, what do you know? They're shouting at the screen again. They're quoting it and doing, I can't seem to escape that, but that's all right. And then the next thing, I've always been fascinated with UFOs and all that. And I got a chance to interview the subject behind the movie Fire in the Sky, which came out in 1993, which was based on a true story. So I got to interview him. I took a UFO night tour, and I've been scouting in New Mexico and Iceland and all that stuff to make a UFO abduction film, kind of along the lines of like, a Close Encounters or Ex Machina, kind of, trying to say something about where that culture is now. So I've been reading a lot and studying. And so that's been a really fun ride. Right now, the title is called Forbidden Sky, and hope to make that either later this year or next year. And then I also, as a break from the Alien movie, I wrote about a really weird experience I had a few years back, sort of online stalker kind of, I think I told you a little bit about that story, but so kind of along the lines of like You, the Netflix series, and Fatal Attraction kind of deal. So those are the two scripts I wrote during the pandemic that I hope to make later this year.
Now, next year is going to be the 20th anniversary of the film's, I suppose, production and initial release, which is in 2003 in Los Angeles. Obviously, we know what you're up to, but Tommy seems to have kind of disappeared after the disaster artist, besides with the exception of perhaps the promise of a big shark movie. So tell us a little bit about where's Tommy now and what's he up to?
Yeah, so it was funny because we did, before we made Best Friends, I thought it was sort of a big endeavor to just go out and make a film. It had been 15 years. I was like, why don't we shoot a few scenes and feel it out, see if, we can still walk and talk at the same time and capture something on camera. And I think I'd sent you a teaser link when we had just kind of played with the idea, and then we released the teaser, but there was no movie. It was like we just shot a fake trailer. And then everyone was like, oh, I want to see this. So it was sort of like, pushing ourselves, a motivational tactic. So we went out, made the film. So he always had an idea. He's always like floating ideas, but on that day it was like a shark movie. So we were randomly in New Orleans. We shot a few scenes, and then he leaked the trailer to kind of do the same idea. And then the movie's never gotten made. So I think he's still in that mindset of like, shark movie someday will get made. And then the pandemic happened, which saved me. No, I'm just kidding. But he, is still, that's sort of where his mind's at.
Oh, great. Well, please give him our best. Him and Raoul, his assistant, who seems to have exactly the same syntax and ability at typing.
What great recruitment. I mean, for being able to find somebody that can just speak the same way, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know what? If Big Shark gets made, you got to have a cameo in it, even if it's over Zoom as like a newscaster. I think the reporter of like the storms hitting Australia on the news talking about.
Well, it sounds increasingly like reality. We just haven't had the giant sharks floating down the streets yet. But give it time. It's that this is the decade for it, as we know. So let's take a wait and see approach. But yeah, thanks very much for talking to us today, and hopefully we'll see you again over here in Australia soon.
Absolutely, anytime.
Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
Where's Dent?
Those mobsters, those fools want you gone so they can go back. They cannot go back because you change everything forever.
Then why do you want to kill me?
Change everything forever.
Then why do you want to kill me?
I don't want to kill you. Why should I kill you? What I would do without you? You complete me.